It's time for this week's parting shots.
Credibility is like insurance. You don't need it until you need it. Now, Adam Silver spent 6 years developing a reputation as a credible, reasonable commissioner. That bought him careful handling from the media when the NBA waited too long to shut down in March, waiting for the league's first positive COVID-19 test. But his insistence recently that his league would not return until his players were safe and tests could be ethically procured gives the impression, right or wrong, that the NBA is willing to forego some money in the name of the greater good. Whenever they return, there will be questions about the league's intentions, but the tone will be civil. I doubt we'll trust anyone associated with college athletics that much. We shouldn't. The most craven corner of the sports landscape deserves our skepticism given how powerless the unpaid players are. The push to play college football ASAP feels more uncomfortable because everything about that world is uncomfortable. In spite of having access to more experts than anyone, it's college campuses after all, the word of coaches, athletic directors, and college presidents is the shakiest. But what about the NFL? For years, they've answered to no one. But even the typically docile NFL media questioned the league holding its draft on schedule, even though the event was virtual. They've made it too easy for us to assume the worst. Lucky for them, they have time to figure it out, and with the luxury of more information than MLB, the NBA, and the NHL. But will we believe the NFL when they unveil their ultimate plan? Will players and fans feel safe? The NFL will need every drop of credibility it has to make the 2020 season work.
America loves shooting messengers and ignoring messages. So thank God for Nick Saban. Last week, Saban filmed a whole video with Big Al the elephant, and he told the state of Alabama to please wear a mask. Now, on a reasonable planet, Saban's warning would be honestly forgettable. But on our planet, where masks are somehow weapons in a culture war, I cannot stop thinking about how useful Saban's voice actually is. If anyone is immune to charges of virtue signaling, it's the head football coach at Alabama. And if anyone transcends PC culture, it's probably the guy who celebrated winning a national title by saying, "That damn game cost me a week of recruiting." Saban is transparently and always obsessed with more football. So if the CDC isn't authority enough for you and over 100,000 American deaths feel kind of abstract, please just listen to Nick Saban. Wearing a mask around other people for the protection of other people might be inconvenient, I admit. But it's also how we might ensure more football. And maybe you do care about that.
A Tom Brady documentary called Man in the Arena is coming to ESPN, the title derived from a Teddy Roosevelt speech from more than 100 years ago. Athletes love this excerpt because it compliments the performer, brave enough to risk judgment and failure on the road to success. But while validating those in the arena, it also dismisses those on the sideline, in the stands, or press box, saying, quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better." I think about this part whenever someone quotes Man in the Arena, because it's just not true. We know that the critic counts because athletes in particular continue using their slights and commentary as motivation. The college football team unhappy with its preseason ranking, the GOAT who recalls which reporters picked his team to lose, the MVP who keeps his college rejection letters and later falls in the NFL draft. Brady has also been famously fueled by this notion that he is just a system QB, lucky enough to be on Bill Belichick's team. Look, in the beginning, just wanting to win is motivation enough. But after that, staying atop the mountaintop requires adopting and maniacally clinging to an "I'll show them" mentality. So maybe, instead of insulting those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat, we could recognize the role the critic plays in elevating the great ones from just another guy to the man in the arena.
Here's the thing about Lance Armstrong. He was a cheater and he was a liar, but he was also the greatest cyclist in the world and the steeliest of competitors. I have no doubt that he's the kind of guy who would not have hesitated to grab his slingshot, march straight up to Goliath, and poke him in the eye. Of course, Armstrong's aggressiveness is his defining trait, for good and bad. When you talk about Armstrong, you have to talk about two separate but distinct categories of wrongdoing. In one category, there's the doping and the lying about the doping. In the context of the sport, which was saturated with drugs, Armstrong made the decision to compete to win. And back in that era, you couldn't expect to compete if you weren't cheating. It's the other category of wrongdoing that remains so troubling and that forms the emotional spine of the 30 for 30 Lance. I'm talking about the character assassination and the lawsuits, the relentless hounding of his critics. Armstrong says in the film that he wishes he'd been a better man, and I believe him. But he still seems not to fully grasp how we got here, how he went from being arguably the most revered athlete on the planet to ignominy. And maybe that's the point. If he did understand, he wouldn't be Lance Armstrong.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.